Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Happy Wednesday morning to you. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and this is what I call my morning musings. We're in the midst of a study of the eschatology of the parables of Jesus. In my last segment, I suggested to you that the parable of the prodigal son, if we look at it within the history or within the scope of the mission of Jesus, is tremendously eschatological. Now, I didn't used to look at it that way at all. I used to look at it as, quote, simply an expression of the grace of God. Now, believe me, it is that in spades. And I'm going to talk about that, okay? But I want us to look at it, first of all, within the framework of Jesus' mission. What was Jesus' mission? Well, Jesus said, Matthew chapter 15, 10 and following, I am sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, there's a horrid, incredibly illogical view out there that says, well, Jesus was sent only to Israel, never intended for the Gentiles to be saved. Well, it's ridiculous. The Old Testament very clearly teaches that all Israel, that is the remnant, had to be brought in so that the nations, all nations, could then enjoy Israel's salvation. Salvation was to the Jew first, then to the Greek. And so when we look at the parable in the framework of Jesus' mission, I am come to seek and to save that which was lost. Well, throughout the entire story of the Old Testament, the emphasis on that which is, quote, lost, especially in the context, for instance, of the lost sheep. It's Israel. When we look then at John chapter 11, 50 and 51, that Jesus was sent to gather together the children of God that were scattered abroad. So, when we look at the prodigal son and we see that a certain man had two sons, both houses of Israel. One departed from the household. 10 northern tribes departed from the household and was swallowed up by the nations. Swallowed up by the nations, and in being swallowed up, she died. Just as the father described this elder son as dead when in the foreign country. But the Old Testament predicted that Israel would return. Now this is where it becomes eschatological. The story of the restoration of Israel, the bringing back of both houses of Israel, Ezekiel chapter 37, pardon me, Jeremiah 3, 15 and following, a ton of other scriptures, is always set in the last days, at the time of the Messianic kingdom, the time of the Messianic tabernacle, when the Messiah would come. The time of the new covenant, Isaiah 49, 6 and following. This is an eschatological theme through and through. So when the young man comes to himself, just as the Old Testament said Israel would do in the last days, God would give her a soft heart, she would return, and she'd be restored. And so the son returns, and the household is restored. Well, once again, we can't make the mistake of saying, well, because the focus is on Israel, that's the only focus of the work of Jesus Christ. That's a horrid hermeneutic. Just because one thing is mentioned doesn't mean that other things are not included, especially when we look at those other texts. But this story is about the last days restoration of Israel. And what it means is that Zionism is wrong when they say Israel was restored in 1948. No, the restoration of Israel was taking place in the first century through the ministry of Jesus. I am come to seek and to save that which is lost. Folks, dispensationalism and Zionism is taking the work of the restoration of Israel away from Jesus and away from his ministry, ripping it out and putting it in modern time. And by the way, when they point to 1948, Notice the son. Okay? What did this son do? He came to himself and he said, I'm unworthy to be a son. Make me a servant. He humbled his heart and he repented and he came back home. But in 1948, Israel, even according to the dispensationalists, they admit that the majority of Israel then and now were atheists, agnostics, and unbelievers. Folks, that's not the prodigal son coming to himself and saying, Father, I'm unworthy. Just make me a servant. There's nothing about modern dispensationalism, nothing about modern Zionism that fits the story of the prodigal son and the restoration of Israel that began in the ministry of Jesus 2,000 years ago. We got so much more on the prodigal son that you're going to love when we talk about this magnificent grace. In the meantime, go to my website, eschatology.org or BibleProphecy.com, and order my 32-lesson series on the parables of Jesus. Fantastic stuff, even if I do say so, okay? Make a note that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, and that'll save you $5. Hey, thanks so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. I hope you're beginning to see the power of the eschatology of the parables of Jesus. We'll see you on the flip side.